Welcome to your Aged Care Compass podcast. Join us to find out how to support your older loved ones at home. We're going to help you make sense of Australia's aged care system. We talk about legal and financial considerations for ageing and how chronic health conditions impact your older loved ones' well-being. And we share real-life stories of where it went wrong for people and how we got them back on track.
Welcome everyone. It's great to have you back for our next episode of Your Aged Care Compass. Today I'm talking with James Whitelaw, co-founder and chairman of self-managed provider Trilogy Care. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Coral.
There's a pervading negativity in the sector and media tend to report on everything that is wrong with aged care. People, consumers are angry and dispirited, and they often have a dim view of providers. But so many providers are doing great things. It's just that we don't hear about them. So before we jump into our conversation about Trilogy Care, there's a little story that I wanted to share with listeners. In December 2023, where I live up here in far north Queensland, we had Cyclone Jasper. What we didn't anticipate after the cyclone was the amount of water. The clouds hung over us for about a week and we had the worst flooding that we have experienced up here. Many older people were trapped in their flooded homes for days, and in some parts of the region, support was very slow. So, recognising a need, I went out and tried to do what I could with limited means. Two of my advocate colleagues, Amina Ship and Alwyn Blaze, launched a crowdfunding campaign. And I put a call out on LinkedIn to ask providers to chip in to this campaign and support me to be able to deliver clinical services and products to these older people who had lost so much. And the fabulous thing, not surprising, the generosity of Trilogy Care is that Trilogy Care jumped in straight away and offered a significant amount in a donation towards that cause. And we ended up raising $20,000 in that campaign. So many people who have been unaware of this at the time, it did get some press. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is great providers are doing great things behind the scenes that don't necessarily sit within the day-to-day work of home service provision. And it's important, I think, to restore the confidence and the trust of consumers that although you might not see it and read it, providers are doing excellent things. So I guess that little preamble, for me, it was important to make because your generosity meant a lot to me and older people at that time. So thank you, James.
That's great. Thank you.
So I've always loved the story behind the founding of Trilogy Care. Tell me about that, James, co-founding with your son, Will, and then tell us about Ines and Peter.
Yeah, and Coral, in talking about Ines and Peter, my in-laws, there's a connection there. They were in Cairns. So that was a pretty easy reaction from me and from Trilogy, was to help you out as a result of the Cyclone Jasper flooding. And my wife grew up in Cairns. We went to Cairns several times a year. So we've been married 35 years, and the children, all their grandparents were up there. So that affinity, it wasn't a very difficult thing for us to contribute to your appeal because of that connection. And so in 2017, Peter and Ines were living on the property. They have a little bit of acreage out at Smithfield on the north side of Cairns, living in the property where they'd lived since the 1970s. And Ines had early stage dementia and had lost her license. She turned 75 in 2017 and was required to do a driving test and failed. And Peter, his mobility was deteriorating at that time. And so Ines was really stranded from the viewpoint of wanting to enjoy going to the beach each day with her dogs and having some sort of enjoyment, thing that she'd enjoyed and taken for granted. So my wife, Anna, and I lived on the Sunshine Coast. So we're a long way away. we knew they needed some help, but too far away. So we then went through the ACAT assessment to see if we could get some support for them. And so it came about that Innes was given a level 2 package and Peter was given a level 1 package. At that time, I had the two together. It's about $24,000, 15 odd grand for level 2 and 9,000 for level 1. So I thought, great, I've got $24,000 to spend. And I think it's well known that I'm an accountant by profession, been in public practice in the accounting world since the 90s, so 30 odd years, and a sort of bit of a numbers man. So I thought 24 grand should get us a bit of support.
Yeah.
I made contact with one of the large providers in Cairns and was surprised that they were offering so little. The main support I needed was to drive Ines each day to the beach with the dogs so she could go for a walk. So there was that social support. They were quite capable cleaning and the like and supporting themselves, but that was the most significant thing that she wanted. And that just wasn't going to be possible very often with the number of hours that they suggested. So I sort of investigated and got an understanding of why it got so little and saw the fees and charges, saw the hourly rates. And then an advocate had said to me, have you thought about self-managing? And I said, no, what's that? We were talking 2017. And so they explained what it is and suggested I make contact with a very small self-managed provider, a husband and wife operation that had around about 100 clients at that time. And they agreed to take Peter and Ines on and they closed their books. So I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. Why are you closing your books? Why aren't you telling people about what you're doing,
Mm.
And they said, well, it's just the two of us and that's all we want. And I said, oh, well, why don't you have, 100 clients? Why don't you have 200, 500? Because what you're doing is amazing. You're delivering virtually double the amount of hours for the same dollar value. And so there started the journey. They said, no, we're not doing that. We'd have to employ some people, right? And they didn't want to do that. So I said to them, oh, well, I'd like to really do what you're doing. And they said, knock yourself out. That's fine. We're very happy with what we're doing. And so over the next 2 years, it was a case of understanding it, learning. There was a lot to learn and be prepared. What started out to me like a bookkeeping business, right? That was
You're a numbers man. That's right.
I'm a numbers man. I'm thinking this is a bookkeeping business. It's a financial administration business. But then the reality hit that there's extensive clinical governance that's required as well. There are systems to be built to be able to administer both the clinical aspects and the financial aspects of the business. So it wasn't a case of 2017, right, I'm into it. There was this period of preparation. And so Trilogy Care came into existence in late 2019. It's really when we started the business. And then throughout 2020, there was significant preparation for that. And in the second half of 2020, calendar 2020, we started getting clients. During that period from 2017 through to 2019, 2020, I was self-managing Peter and Ines's plans. So they're a consumer. I'm a consumer's son-in-law. So I had that experience to come to rely upon. And so that was useful.
Absolutely. You brought all that personal experience to your new business, to Trilogy Care.
And then it was a case of finding support, understanding how one finds support and negotiates through that process. And I was a Mabel user. So what Mabel had created was a great marketplace, well administered, made life easy. And that coupled with the fact that I already had some of the support, that they were already getting someone to help them with the garden or the lawn, more to the point. And
Right.
I was able to onboard them as well, quite separate from Mabel. So I had support both within Mabel and outside of Mabel.
Fantastic. So you were on the Sunshine Coast and they were still up here in Cairns.
Yes.
What did that look like? I guess vetting to researching who was available up here, and then how did you figure out who was going to be a good fit for them?
That's a very good question. Peter and Innes are quite unique, right? Unique to another term for they can be difficult sometimes.
Okay.
I'm not speaking out of turn here. And so I had to find someone who fitted with their personalities.
Yeah.
And I had my successes and I had some failures. And there was a bit of trial and error, but we worked through that. The fact that they're my in-laws, we did visit them reasonably regularly during this period. So we were able to meet the carers and get to know them. And the other thing I loved about self-management is that there's this direct communication between me or my wife and that person. We didn't have to go through some sort of intermediary.
It's a fantastic model, James. It really is. I love it because it gives people choice and flexibility and some degree of control as well, which we all value, don't we? Regardless of whether we're older or younger or no matter what.
Looking for better value, more flexibility and real choice in home care? Discover self-management with Trilogy Care, Australia's fastest growing home care provider. Trilogy Care supports older Australians to live independently at home. Clients choose the care workers and services that best suit them, all at a lower cost than fully managed providers. They are passionate, operate nationwide, and are committed to helping clients take control, wherever they are. To experience better care, contact the friendly team at Trilogy Care today on 1300 459 190.
So as their needs increased and you perhaps tried to source other kinds of support, maybe clinician support, maybe an occupational therapist to do a home safety assessment, how did you achieve that? Did you find that easy enough to do, or was that a difficult task?
It was easy enough in that we were able to find local occupational therapists, both through Mabel. Mabel's a platform that enabled not just personal carers, there's domestic support or domestic assistance people, but also health professionals. So
Yeah.
sometimes that was the easiest way. Alternatively, we may have already known the physio or
Yes.
someone who was local. Peter and Innes only lived a matter of 500 metres away from a large medical centre where there's a variety of health professionals. So, and they will be able to be onboarded to the aged care provider at the time, and ultimately Trilogy Care, who's so important to be able to just get them onboarded. It was a lot easier to get, a health professional onboarded onto the aged care provider, the self-managed providers network. Say for a personal carer, there's a lot more work that's required, police checks and qualification checks and the like.
Yeah. So in 2019, you and Will co-founded Trilogy. What have been the notable challenges that you've faced within the aged care sector over the past 6 years? And we had a brief chat before. We're not going to get into that enormous discussion of support at home, but please feel free to touch on that. But I'm curious as to what those challenges are in what I see as a very progressive and successful model, the self-managed model.
Yes. Yeah. And look, Will 31 years old nowadays. So in 2019, 20, he's 25, 26 years old, an accounting graduate. Technology was amazing.
Tech savvy.
Technology skills. So you have this combination of old world and new world, right? 60-year-old nowadays, a businessman, if you like, coming from that side, and he's coming in with the technology solutions to achieve the outcome. So we're very lucky with that being a partnership. My accounting firm was in Brisbane and I lived on the Sunshine Coast. So I did live in Brisbane during the week, so I didn't have to commute so much.
Yep.
And William lived with me. So we had this whole thing where it was 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. We were still talking about the Trilogy in the evenings.
Yes.
We don't live together anymore, by the way. So but he's married, and so we don't do that nowadays. But that was probably a really good contributing factor to the success or the positive outcome that we got. He's building systems. We made sure that we took great advice from industry professionals, experienced people. Jim Toohey has been on the board. He's the chairman of Carers Queensland up here. He's been on the Trilogy board since commencement. So he gave us that knowledge, the depth.
Knowledge and expertise, yeah.
Kylie Radburn, who is also a consultant in this area, we engaged with her to really assess the gaps in our knowledge, in our systems. And we did that early when we had not many consumers. So when we came to our first audit, we did quite well. And we have an amazing working relationship with the Aged Care Commission, and just taking on their view and advice and working with them has enabled us to ensure that we're fully compliant and we meet all. It's not a relationship that we see as any sort of combative relationship. We've been working with them over those years to make sure that we produce the best possible system and operating model we can that's in line with their thinking as well.
Yep.
So I guess if I said if there had been any challenges in respect of compliance, we've worked through those collaboratively. Our systems have gone from being an adaptation of other platforms to being our own bespoke built systems, following the process. So that making sure our systems are built to the process.
Yeah. Brilliant. So thorough, James. I think every step that you've taken, to me, what you've just said is you've been absolutely thorough, and taking on board the Commission's recommendations in such a positive way is obviously attributed to your successful model.
Yes. And our consumers enjoy the experience. I can only speak positively. So when you say what challenges have we had, I just keep thinking of the positive things.
But that's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And we have a workforce now of 250 people approximately. And in a period of time when there are significant labour shortages, we're able to hire fairly with some agility, right?
Yeah.
People like coming to work at Trilogy. So we've been lucky that we've been able to gather the people. It's a fairly young workforce because it's a bit techy, but there's a fair bit of grey hair around too, don't worry. And I like the grey hair because I have grey hair myself. So it's a great combination.
Yeah. So you've got a fantastic culture as well. I was going to say that with the exponential growth of Trilogy Care over the past 6 years, I know that you have had to relocate several times. And I remember coming to Brisbane once, and you've since moved from that premises. In fact, I think you were moving within months of when I visited. And I remember stepping out of the elevator and just this sense of, God forbid, I should say fun, in this workplace that was in the aged care sector, and friendliness, and people just being so energized by what they were doing. I really noticed that. So again, you have a great culture within the team. So look, is self-management here to stay?
Well, absolutely. It continues to deliver superior outcomes, in my view,
Yes.
as a consumer or the son-in-law of the consumers, and as the business owner. There's this flight to self-management that
Yes.
has stopped. And yeah, I think it's the way forward. It's not for everyone. There are people that perhaps a fully serviced model would suit, but even those people who don't have a me in their family who can help them self-manage, we have good partnership arrangements all around the country with people who then have a coordination business that helps people. And even with that additional cost of that coordination service, it still produces a better financial outcome. That is a better volume of support they get, and far better volume under self-managed or our self-managed plus model.
Yes.
So it's definitely here to stay, and we have to keep improving our systems and adapt to regulatory change, of course.
Yeah. So in the next few weeks, I'm going to be chatting with other people in your team who are also we're going to be talking about other wonderful, innovative programs that Trilogy Care is launching or underpinning, if you like. There's one thing I wonder if you might want to touch on is the Ironbark Housing project. What's that
Yes.
about, James?
Yes. So if I hark back to my accounting roots, one thing I've sort of done well over the years as I have a property expertise. So I'm trying to create a legacy for rural and remote communities as part of the Trilogy Care story. I know you're going to be talking to Leslie Bryce and David Malloy about the Trilogy Care Foundation and what we're doing to help people. And from the beneficiary of these rural and remote communities, the benefit I'm trying to build for them is housing solution. Many of our consumers in these small rural towns that we're collaborating with, or people within those towns, are living in unsuitable housing where they're rattling around in a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom house that's not fit for purpose. And they would rather be in a village doing activities.
Yeah.
And so, but it is entirely financially unviable to do a village in a rural town, right?
Yeah.
So I'm collaborating with the state government in Queensland to start off with, where they'll provide funding from their affordable housing pool of funds to assist with the construction of small villages in small towns. So Anna and I have seeded a charity called Ironbark Housing, which will be the entity that goes forward and tries to deliver this program, so that Trilogy's mission is for older Australians to live in the homes they love for longer, right?
Yes.
That is Trilogy's mission, empowering those older Australians. We then take that a bit further and say we also want them to stay in their community longer. And if they have unsuitable housing with no infrastructure, with a lack of support, then, the people, when you'll be talking to Leslie from Bell in rural Queensland, the people of Yarraman, the people of Mossman up your way, they will need to move away from their community to get that support. But they don't want to go into residential care just yet. They're not ripe for it either. So we need to provide them with some form of housing solution that enables them to stay in their community longer as well, not just living in their home longer, the home they love, but living in the community longer. So that's sort of the beneficiary, I hope, of the Trilogy Care story.
That's remarkable, James. Absolutely visionary. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I hope it works. Well, it will.
Well, I'll be bringing you back on the show at some point and we'll do an update. Okay. Yeah.
We're very excited about that. Otherwise, we just put our head down at Trilogy and continue to tell the story and grow the self-managed story.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed chatting with you about, I call it the foundational story, because from having been aware of the story, it was where Trilogy Care really began. So thank you, James, for coming on the show today and sharing that story with all of our listeners. It was a story that I have been wanting to share for some time. Listeners, next week, you heard James and I just touch on the other Trilogy Care stories that are coming. We have David Malloy and Leslie Bryce, who will be discussing the community care, the Our Town Cares model, which is another remarkable story. And if you want to take a sneak peek and see what's behind that story, you can Google Bell Cares. The ABC ran a story on what Leslie really pioneered out in the little town of Bell. But for today, we will call that a wrap for this episode. And I look forward to catching up with everybody next week with another excellent Trilogy Care story. James, thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks, Coral. It's been great talking to you. We've known you for a number of years, and that's a great thing that you're doing, getting the message out there. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hey, Care community. Thanks for listening to this episode. So you never miss a show, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. If you'd like to know more about what we do, head to our website, cmeacn.com.au.